safely. We're working with partners from Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, Oregon State Police, Washington County Sheriff's Office, Port of Portland, many other partners in the region. So I just want to let people know that we do have good partnerships still with our law enforcement partners, and we're working together to see what we can put together as far as resources for Saturday. So one of the asks I have of people in the community and people who are coming to this event on Saturday, we want a peaceful event. The things that we respond to are what is put in front of us. Really, the response from police is based on the actions of people in a crowd or at a gathering. So we ask that you come peacefully and engage in your free speech peacefully. We've had instances where groups have tried to come together and have altercations with each other. We're not wanting to see that in our city. We want people to come, exercise their rights peacefully, have a safe event. It's okay for us to disagree about things, but at the end of the day, doing so peacefully, letting people exercise their rights safely is very important. So that's my ask of the folks who are attending and of the community as well. I'll bring Chief Davis up if there's any questions specifically about Saturday or about any of the events planned for the weekend.
Sorry if I missed it. Did you say which partners are going to be helping on Saturday?
Yeah, we're working with a bunch of partners right now. OSP, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, Washington County, and I think some other partners we're in conversation with, and it just remains to see what resources they'll provide.
Will any of those partners be providing crowd control systems?
You know, at this point, we're still in contact with partners that may. I think it's going to depend on how fluid this situation is. But right now, we're really depending on Portland Police Bureau, RRT, and then we'll see what other resources we can bring to bear in the next 48 hours or so.
Related to Saturday, one of the last times we saw a couple different groups kind of clash, someone died. What are you guys doing now to protect the safety of those people who are at these protests as well as the rest of the community?
Sure. Our goal, like I said, is to be able to keep folks apart. I mean, these are very fluid, and it's very possible small factions can break off and go to other places. So we're trying to posture ourselves where we can respond to things that might take place in other areas or throughout the city. But, you know, at the end of the day, we can't be everywhere. We can only do the best we can do with our resources. But our goal is to really keep people apart, let people have a safe event, and kind of exercise their free speech rights safely.
Do you anticipate these groups trying to meet up again somewhere in the city, or do you think they're going to stay in the parts of town that they've kind of said that they would at the beginning?
My hope is that they'll stay in the areas that they're talking about right now. Our goal and our hope is that they do not try to come together and have altercations or conflict with one another. But at the same time, we don't always get to control that either. But that's our hope, and that's what we're hoping they'll do.
Does Portland Police plan on being in the streets, or are you guys taking more of an approach of watching and reacting to kind of what takes place between these two groups?
Our plan is to have a very visible presence and to be very visible. But at the same time, it's going to depend on what our resources are, how many people show up, what activities they engage in. If we're resourced and can safely interact in violent conflict, we'll make that determination based on the situation. But our goal is to definitely have a high visibility and let people know that we're in the area.
How many officers from the Portland Police Bureau do you expect to have on the ground on Saturday? Being highly visible like that.
Yeah, that might be a better question for Chief Davis.
Thank you. I can talk a little bit more about some of the specifics. I don't want to give away too many of our the operational details, obviously, like exactly how many officers we'll have where, but what I can say is that we have canceled regular days off, and we anticipate having a fairly large number of our officers here, as well as some number of officers from other agencies. All the other agencies in the area are fairly resource stretched like we are, so we're still working out exactly how much the other agencies can bring to the event.
On
Sure.
their permit application, the Proud Boys estimated 10,000 attendees, 10,000 spectators. What are you or do you expect that number, or what are you planning for?
It's equal parts art and science when you're planning for one of these events, because sometimes you'll see events where a event planner will say they have 10,000 people coming and maybe 1,000 show up, and sometimes you actually have more. So it's hard to pin down exactly what we expect. We expect somewhere in the thousands, but there's a fair amount of uncertainty just because we know from the event announcement that it's people saying that they're coming from all over the country. And so when it's not an event that's mostly local people, those crowd estimates can be pretty imprecise.
The fact that the Parks Bureau denied a permit for the Cowboys to gather at Delta Park, are police going to take any steps to prevent them from assembling there?
No, because the permit was denied on the grounds that it violates the governor's COVID orders, but there's a fine balancing act that we have to do between those legitimate public health guidelines and then people's rights to free speech. And so it's especially challenging if we're going to say, we're going to take some kind of enforcement action against 1,000 or more people who are there for a free speech event, and particularly when we've had a lot of free speech events since May 29th. With thousands of people in them. One thing we would ask, obviously, is the same public health asks that there are of all of us, that people wear masks, that they try to maintain social distancing, because there is still a COVID crisis going on.
Will there be any, in the past, when the groups have gathered downtown, there's been some efforts to restrict weapons among the crowd? Are those steps going to be taken Saturday?
The short answer is yes. With firearms, it's a little bit different for some reason because of the legalities and the constitutional issues there. But one thing that we do want to be really clear about and make sure people understand about firearms, because sometimes at some of these events we are seeing open carry of firearms. Oregon is an open carry state for firearms, but it is illegal under Portland City Code to carry a loaded firearm in the city unless you have, in a public place, unless you have an Oregon concealed handgun permit. So that's one thing we want to make sure people understand, is that we expect that people will abide by the city's firearms regulations, and officers will be, where appropriate, inquiring of people that they observe with firearms with magazines in them, whether those weapons are in fact loaded, and if anybody who possesses one of those has an Oregon handgun license.
How do you guys respond to Lovell County Sheriff Mike Reese and OSP's statement that they put out yesterday regarding use of tear gas and not coming in to provide some of that support they need this week?
As agency heads, they have to make those decisions. And, the way law enforcement works in the United States is all of us ultimately report to an elected official. And our duly elected officials made the decisions that they did. Those are agencies that are independent of the city of Portland, and they need to make the decisions they make. For us, obviously, resources are a challenge for large events like this, especially when you might have 2 or 3 of them going in the city all at once. But in our conversations with the sheriff and with the state police, we've just tried to work around those issues and see where we still can engage those partners in ways that will be helpful to the city. And there will still be a presence from those agencies here. It just might not be in the same roles that we've had them here in the past.
Would they be kind of backfilling in with patrols type stuff?
That's one mission for the sheriff's office, and then actually it's a couple agencies in Clackamas County that are coming to help us at this point, and we're working with some others in the metro area. We have some folks, I think, from the Milwaukee Police Department who will be helping with radio calls in part of the city so that we can take those officers who would normally be working there and use them for the event. And then I think we're working with Lake Oswego Police on some traffic enforcement assets. We'll have a fairly large, our whole traffic division will be working the roads around these events just to ensure traffic safety, deal with any traffic violations like some of the ones we've seen in the past. You know, there's the I-5 construction over the weekend that causes a pretty big traffic concern, and so that's a big part of our plan is to manage that, so we'll get some help at least from Lake Oswego with that. By Saturday there may be more, but between us and the mayor's office we're working on shoring up some of those assets.
Are you still expecting 2 events Saturday at noon, or have you learned of more any changes?
Right now I believe we are expecting 2 or 3. There may be a third one planned for Waterfront Park, but we're trying to get some more details about that.
Are there, I thought there was 2 at Delta Park, 1 at Peninsula Park, and then you're saying that as well, Waterfront Park?
There's 1 at Delta Park and there's 1 at Peninsula Park, and then there may be 1 at Washington Park as well. Or, excuse me, Waterfront Park, not Washington Park, 2 different places.
I want to revisit the beginning of what we were talking about with that Molotov cocktail or whatever device you want to call it. We saw in some of the arrest logs this morning some were charged with attempted murder. Is that related to what we saw with the Molotov cocktail?
I don't want to comment a whole lot on an open investigation, but and I don't want to talk too much about that because that attempted murder incident is still under active investigation, but I anticipate we'll be releasing some more information about that case in particular very soon.
Last night, there were federal officers out on the street as well. Did Portland Police call for their assistance, and do you expect federal officers to be out on Saturday?
My understanding of what happened last night is it got so violent out here that the Federal Protective Service called and asked if we needed their help, and our incident commander decided that we did. And you know, what was reported to me was a very chaotic scene, and obviously you saw some of the images of what was going on out there. We do not anticipate asking for their assistance on Saturday. That was more of an emergency need in the moment, considering how violent it got out here last night.
And just to follow up on that question, was it federal officers who used tear gas last night?
I don't believe anyone used tear gas last night.
I heard that there might have been some talk that there might have been, but just wanted to clarify on that.
No, I don't know of any tear gas that was used.
Previous situations like this where there's been opposing, groups in the city, obviously somebody died, as previously mentioned. What are you doing differently this time to keep people from finding each other in downtown after these events are over? Because that was, the caravan, that's what happened, right? So,
Right.
Is it legal? Can you block off entry points to the city from the freeways? Is that constitutional? Can you do something?
We have the lawful authority to direct traffic on city streets under Portland City Code. Obviously, we have to be able to articulate some reason for doing that, and we have to be very careful not to block a street or deny access to an area strictly because of somebody planning to exercise their First Amendment rights there. If we are trying to prevent violence, that is an option that we have. It's not the kind of thing that we will be able to come out publicly and say we're going to shut down downtown at this time, because it really just depends on the situation on the ground. It's also a very resource-intensive thing to do, to shut off part of the city. So as a practical matter, it's very difficult to say shut down all of downtown. But we can, we do have the lawful authority to regulate traffic in order to maintain public safety. Does that answer your question?
And I guess just more generally, what are you looking at differently this time based on what happened the last time?
First of all, we're trying to have a lot more resources in place and a lot more visible, just uniform police presence, rather than such a heavy focus only on specialty crowd management public order units. And we will be doing a lot of just regulating of traffic on the way into and out of these events to facilitate the movement of traffic. One of the problems that we had at that event on the, was that the 29th, that was that column of vehicles got stopped at one point, and so, and we had to get some officers to where the blockage was to fix that problem and get traffic moving again. So one of the specific things that we're going to try and do is keep traffic moving and avoid that situation where you have a bunch of traffic just stopped for a long period of time. Creates those flashpoints.
We had a hiatus basically in some of the protest activities a while back. Two parts. Have you guys noticed any differences in some of the activities that you've been seeing since then, or maybe expect moving forward? And have you changed anything that the police bureau is doing in response to some of these conversations?
Well, we certainly, last night we saw a level of violence that I don't think we've seen yet, and so that trend is not good. But that's last night, and so you know, I can't say that just because last night was exceptionally violent that that's the beginning of a trend. I certainly hope not. You know, we have evolved our approach to this all along because our goal is really to have the minimum amount of police intervention necessary to solve whatever the problem is, but we're really kind of at the mercy of the people who show up, in this case right outside this building last night, and what they intend to do. You know, we have tried, obviously, a number of approaches over the summer, right? We tried to fence off part of downtown. That fence became the focal point for a while. We reduced the fence to try to de-escalate that. Then this building became the focal point. So we have had to shift as the people who show up in various parts of the city every night have shifted their approach. But we certainly hope that, you know, the use of fire bombs and the kind of violent attacks on our police officers that we saw last night won't happen anymore. That's unacceptable, I think, for everyone. Oh, just that, like I said, you know, we're in ongoing discussions with outside agencies. So, just to clarify the agencies that we're working with right now, we have commitments from the state police, from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and these are for various things, not necessarily for crowd management, public order policing specifically, but state police, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, the Lake Oswego Police Department, and the Milwaukee Police Department. And we are still working on some of the Washington County area agencies. We've got calls in to some of them, and we just haven't been able to connect yet.
That's less than the number of officers or other agencies that helped out last August?
Yes. I think we had 14 agencies last August.
One last question, real quick.
Yeah, it's the same organizers from last August. Are you guys going to visibly say you're going to separate the crowds? I know you guys talked about it before. And the second thing is, if people have guns, is that something where you will intervene in any situation, or, you know, we saw that with just as Just Simmons who pointed gun. What's the right thing?
So yes, I believe it is the same organizers, and you know, again, we're trying to be very clear in the messaging about the rules with regard to guns. I will tell you that our preference would be that we don't bring guns. There's really, I don't see a real need to bring guns to an event like this, although it's not my decision. Certainly, that causes us a heightened level of concern if you have two groups of people, some number of whom on either side are armed with firearms, that come into conflict with one another, and it would be important to try to resolve that conflict as quickly as possible. The challenges are that, you know, if you have groups numbering in the hundreds to thousands, that's a really difficult task, even if no one is armed. So that's why our primary goal will be to keep these groups out of contact with one another completely. That's really the safest way to get through this event, and of course, we're going to ask for the cooperation of the people involved in these events, to just understanding that in the past it has gotten so heated that sometimes there's been violence. Just stay apart so that we can avoid having people get carried away with the moment and have some of the scenes that we've seen here before. We just don't need to have that in our city.
Can I ask one more question about the venue, Delta Park? Were the organizers the ones who decided on their own to move to that location, or did the city encourage them in any way to pick a different location? Can you talk something like that?
The organizers chose that. The first we heard that they were coming to Delta Park was when they announced that was where they were going. Yeah, we didn't suggest that to them.
And before we break, I just want to reiterate to everyone, these are very challenging situations, not only the crowd management, but the other parts of the city that we need to keep open. We still need to answer calls for 911 service. So we're deep into the planning. We're going to be planning into tomorrow and probably right up to Saturday morning. So I just want to let people know that this is evolving. It's fluid. We're going to prepare and try to resource ourselves to be prepared to have a safe event. And from my point of view, I just want to reiterate to folks again, the goal is for safe events, to have safety in our community. Violence and fighting and attempts to injure officers or destroy property are just not productive. And we're asking that people just take that to heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. And just for those of you who are here, there are no planned media events for tomorrow. We're going to really focus on final planning and coordinating with, as the chiefs just described. And Saturday we'll have lots of information. We'll be communicating frequently throughout the day, and so we'll be answering questions and providing as much information as we can as that goes on. We're also open to continuing to talk with any people who have identified themselves as planning or organizers for these events. We've broadcast the ways that they can get in touch with the Portland Police, and we will continue to do so right up through the events on Saturday. Thank you.